Tom lived a quiet life. He worked in a small repair shop on the edge of the city and spent most of his time alone. Sundays were special for him because he walked to the street market to buy fresh meat for the week. The market was alive with colors, smells, and sounds. Humans and aliens moving together, selling fruits, spices, clothes, and tools. Vendors shouted their prices, children ran laughing, and the smell of cooked food made Tom's stomach growl. That morning, Tom put on his worn jacket and left his small apartment. The sun was just rising, painting the buildings with golden light. He felt a small thrill, as he always did, walking through the crowded streets. It was simple, ordinary, but it was comforting. Life was easy when it was predictable. Or so he thought. When Tom reached the meat stalls, he was greeted by the familiar butcher. "Good morning, Tom. Fresh beef today," the vendor called cheerfully. Tom smiled and nodded, scanning the cuts. Everything looked perfect, just like every Sunday. He stepped closer, but his eyes wandered. Something unusual caught his attention. At the far end of the market, a small stall tucked away behind a bright curtain. It seemed quiet, almost lonely compared to the bustling market around it. Curious, Tom walked over, and there she was. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her skin was faintly blue like twilight, and it shimmered slightly under the sun. Her eyes were large and dark, filled with a sadness that made Tom stop in his tracks. She looked fragile, as if the world had already hurt her too many times. Her hair, silver and silky, fell over her shoulders, and she wore a simple tunic that didn't hide her delicate form. For a moment, Tom forgot about the meat, the market, the people around him. He only saw her. Small, quiet, alone. Something inside him stirred. It was not fear, but a strange pull, like he had to protect her. The vendor at her stall noticed Tom staring. "She is for sale," he said nervously. Tom blinked. What do you mean?" he asked. "She is widowed, needs a home, safe hands. Human buyers are rare, but you seem kind," the vendor explained. Tom's mind raced. Buy a person? He had come to the market for meat, not a living being. But he couldn't ignore the look in her eyes, the silent plea that seemed to say, "Please don't leave me here alone." He hesitated, unsure if he was doing the right thing. Fear and logic clashed with something deeper inside him, something that whispered he could help, that maybe he should. He took a deep breath. "I'll take her," he said, surprising even himself. The vendor's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" he asked again. Tom nodded, a small smile forming on his lips. "Yes, I'll take care of her." The alien woman looked at him cautiously. She didn't speak, only tilted her head slightly. Her gaze was shy, wary, and yet there was a hint of hope. Tom felt a strange warmth in his chest, a connection he couldn't explain. He had come to the market for a simple errand, for something ordinary, and instead he had stumbled into something extraordinary. As they prepared to leave, Tom glanced back at the market. The bustling crowd, the colorful stalls, the shouting vendors, all seemed distant now. His focus was on her, on the fragile life that had somehow ended up in his hands. He didn't know her story fully yet, and he didn't know what challenges lay ahead. But for the first time in a long while, he felt that life could surprise him in the best way possible. With a quiet nod, the vendor handed her over. Tom gently guided her toward the vehicle, careful not to frighten her. She walked slowly, almost floating, her eyes scanning everything as if the world was new and strange. Tom didn't rush her. He didn't need to. He felt a protective instinct rising in him, a promise forming in his heart that he would keep her safe, no matter what. That day, the ordinary Sunday market visit ended differently than he could ever imagine. He had gone to buy meat, but he left with something far more precious, a life in his hands and a chance to change both their worlds forever. Tom gently guided the alien woman, who introduced herself as Lyria, to his small vehicle. She moved with quiet grace, her steps careful, almost hesitant, as if the world might shatter beneath her feet. Her eyes, wide and shimmering like dark water under the moon, watched everything with a mix of curiosity and caution. Tom felt an unusual responsibility settle in his chest, a warmth he could not ignore. "Don't be afraid," he said softly, not knowing if she understood him yet. She tilted her head slightly, her silver hair catching the morning sun, and let him help her into the seat. She sat carefully, almost as if the slightest movement could break her. Tom closed the door, feeling the weight of how fragile she seemed, yet sensing a quiet strength beneath her delicate appearance. The streets were busy, yet Tom and Lyria were in a small bubble of silence. He kept his eyes on the road, but kept stealing glances at her. She did not speak much, only watching everything with careful attention. The vendors, the passing aliens, the children playing, all seemed strange and new to her. He realized she must have come from a place far different from the city, a place where life had been hard and kindness rare. "I'm Tom," he finally said, breaking the silence. She looked at him, her dark eyes reflecting a mix of fear and hope. Then, slowly, she whispered, "Lyria." Her voice was soft, melodic, and it stirred something inside him he had never felt before. It was fragile, like the sound of wind through thin leaves, yet it held a depth of emotion that made his chest tighten. He wanted to ask her questions, to know her story, but he also sensed she might not be ready to share yet. Some wounds take time to reveal themselves. The ride was long, but neither rushed. Tom kept the vehicle slow, letting her adjust, letting her watch the world without fear. Every now and then she would reach out, her fingers brushing his arm lightly. Each touch sent an unexpected warmth through him, like a quiet spark of connection. It was brief, almost accidental, but it spoke volumes. When they arrived at Tom's small home, he felt nervous. He had never shared his space with anyone before, let alone someone so different, so fragile. He opened the door and gestured for her to enter first. Lyria stepped inside cautiously, looking at the simple furnishings, the table, chairs, and little kitchen corner. She seemed amazed by the ordinary comforts of his home, as if each object was new to her eyes. Tom offered her water and some bread. She accepted it hesitantly, her fingers brushing his as she reached out. She didn't speak, only nodded, but there was a quiet relief in her posture. He noticed how tense her shoulders relaxed slightly, how the corners of her lips lifted in a faint, almost shy smile. That smile, though small, filled him with an unexplainable joy. As she ate, Tom couldn't stop looking at her. She was unlike anyone he had ever met, so different, yet so human in her emotions. He realized that the loneliness he had accepted in his life could be replaced with something new, something beautiful, if he was brave enough to care for her. Evening fell, and the sky turned shades of pink and gold. Lyria finally spoke again, her voice trembling slightly. I have not had hope in a long time." Tom's heart ached. He did not know her past fully, but he understood enough. "You're safe now," he said simply. "I'll protect you." For the first time in years, she let herself breathe a little easier. The fear that had clung to her like a shadow began to lift. She leaned slightly closer to him, and though she didn't speak, the gesture said more than words ever could. That night, Tom lay awake, thinking about the strange twist of fate that had brought Lyria into his life. He had gone to the market for a simple errand for ordinary meat, and instead had found something extraordinary, a life in need of care, a soul in need of hope, and perhaps a chance for both of them to heal. Outside, the city hummed with life, but inside Tom's small home, there was a fragile peace. A silent understanding had formed between them, a promise that, whatever the future held, they would face it together. And in that quiet moment, Tom realized that sometimes the most extraordinary things come when you least expect them, and the ordinary can become magical with the touch of courage and heart. The next morning, Tom woke to the soft light filtering through the curtains. Lyria was sitting quietly by the window, her eyes focused on the small garden outside. She seemed calm, yet her posture still held a subtle tension, a reminder of all she had been through. Tom watched her for a moment, realizing that this was the first time he had seen her relaxed. Even in this brief calm, he felt a spark of hope that maybe she could find comfort here, in his home, with him. He made breakfast, simple eggs and bread, and set it on the small table. "I hope you like this," he said softly, unsure if she would understand the words, or even the gesture. Lyria looked at the food, then back at him, her expression cautious but curious. She nodded slightly and picked up a piece of bread. The movement was careful, almost hesitant, as if she were testing whether it was safe to trust this world. As she ate, Tom sat across from her, not speaking much. He didn't need to. Just being near her, sharing space, was enough for now. He knew trust could not be forced. It had to grow, slowly, like a flower blooming in the right season. Lyria's eyes, though wary, occasionally met his, and each time, a silent connection passed between them. After breakfast, Tom decided to help her feel more comfortable. "You can look around, touch things, make it yours," he said. Lyria hesitated, then slowly moved toward the small shelves and cupboards. She touched the objects lightly, as if afraid they might vanish. "Tour break." Tom smiled softly. "Everything here is yours to explore," he said. Her lips curved slightly at the corners, a tiny smile, but it was real. Over the next few days, small routines formed. Lyria learned to help with chores, and Tom learned to understand her strange gestures and alien words. Communication was slow, but every shared glance, every careful touch, every smile built a fragile bridge between them. One evening, as Tom was repairing a loose hinge on the kitchen door, Lyria quietly handed him a small, smooth stone she had found outside. "For luck," she said softly in her melodic voice. Tom held it in his hand, feeling the warmth of her gesture. "Thank you," he replied. "I'll keep it with me." One night, after a long day of simple routines, they sat together quietly. Lyria finally spoke again, her voice trembling slightly. I never thought I would be safe again," she whispered. Tom's chest tightened. He reached out, placing a hand gently over hers. "You are safe now," he said simply. "I will not let anything hurt you." Her eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, she allowed herself to lean toward him. The gesture was small, but it carried years of fear, grief, and loneliness. Tom felt a deep ache in his heart, a mixture of sorrow and tenderness. He didn't rush her. He simply let her lean, letting the silence speak the words neither could fully say. As days turned into weeks, the bond between them grew stronger. Lyria began to laugh softly at Tom's awkward attempts to explain human habits. Tom learned to mimic some of her gestures, her subtle ways of expressing herself. They shared small moments of understanding, of warmth, of silent companionship. Each day, Lyria's fear seemed to lessen, replaced by cautious hope. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds, Lyria looked at Tom with a quiet intensity. "You care for me," she said, almost as if stating a fact she had only recently realized. Tom nodded. "I do. You are important to me," he replied. Her eyes glistened with something she had not felt in a long time: trust. And in that moment, Tom understood that the journey ahead would not be easy. But he also knew that with patience, kindness, and care, they could both heal. They could both find a place in the world where fear no longer ruled, where hope and connection could grow. That night, as Lyria finally slept without fear and Tom watched over her, He felt a quiet pride and warmth in his chest. He had no idea what challenges awaited them, but for now, they had each other, and sometimes that was enough to face anything. Life seemed to settle into a quiet rhythm for Tom and Lyria. Days passed with small routines: cooking, cleaning, sharing simple meals, and learning to understand each other. Lyria's laughter became more frequent, her cautious movements more confident, and Tom felt a joy he had never imagined. But peace, he knew, was fragile, especially in a city full of strangers, greed, and curiosity. One afternoon, Tom decided to go back to the market for some supplies. He wanted Lyria to stay safe at home, but she insisted on coming along. "I want to see," she said softly, her dark eyes shining with determination. Tom hesitated, then nodded. He knew she needed to reclaim some small piece of freedom, even if it meant stepping back into the world that had once hurt her. The market was crowded, as always. Vendors shouted their prices, children ran laughing, and alien traders argued loudly over spices. Tom kept Lyria close, walking slowly so she could take in the sights without feeling overwhelmed. Her eyes darted from stall to stall, curiosity mixing with caution. For a while, it felt like any other ordinary market day, the kind Tom had enjoyed for years. Then he noticed a man watching them from a distance. At first, he didn't think much of it. Marketplaces were full of curious eyes. But there was something in the way the man moved, the intensity of his gaze, that set Tom on edge. He recognized him suddenly, the vendor from Lyria's past, the one who had first sold her after her husband's death. Greed and cruelty shone from the man's eyes, and Tom felt a chill run down his spine. The man approached, his steps fast and determined. "She belongs to me," he shouted in a harsh alien voice. People around them paused, sensing tension, but none interfered. Tom stepped in front of Lyria, his chest tight with fear but his mind clear. "No," he said firmly. "She chooses to stay with me," the trader sneered, circling them like a predator. "You're just a human. You cannot protect her. She is mine by right." His words dripped with arrogance and threat. Tom clenched his fists. He knew he was weaker, slower, and less experienced than the alien man. But in that moment, a fierce determination rose inside him. He would not let fear dictate what he did. He would protect Lyria no matter the cost. The fight erupted quickly. Tom dodged, blocked, and struck with pure human grit, using his instincts and wits to his advantage. Each movement was fueled by care, by love, by the refusal to let cruelty win. Lyria stayed close, ready to step back, but trusting him enough to believe he could keep her safe. The battle was tense and exhausting. Tom's human strength could not match the alien's size or speed, but his courage and resourcefulness gave him an edge. A well-timed move, a clever feint, and finally, the traitor stumbled and fell, humiliated and defeated. He snarled one last warning before retreating into the crowd, disappearing like a shadow. Lyria's eyes filled with tears as she ran to Tom. "You risked yourself for me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Tom, exhausted and breathing heavily, smiled gently. "Because you matter," he said simply. "I couldn't let him take you." For the first time, Lyria allowed herself to embrace the idea that someone could care for her so deeply. The fear she had carried for years began to loosen its grip, replaced by trust and gratitude. She looked at Tom with awe, realizing that humans, ordinary, fragile, mortal humans, could possess courage, loyalty, and strength beyond imagination. As they walked home together, hand in hand, the market around them resumed its noisy chaos. But Tom and Lyria were in their own quiet bubble. The world outside might be dangerous, unpredictable, and cruel, but inside that bubble, they had each other, and sometimes that was enough to face anything. That night, Lyria sat by the window thinking about what had happened. She had lost so much in her life, yet here, in this small home with this simple human, she felt something new: hope. And Tom, watching over her quietly, felt a quiet pride and joy, knowing that the ordinary human heart could shine brighter than any weapon, stronger than any fear, and softer than any sorrow. After the terrifying encounter at the market, life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm for Tom and Lyria. The fear of that day still lingered in the back of their minds, but it was overshadowed by a growing sense of comfort and connection. Lyria, once so cautious and reserved, began to show small signs of trust. She smiled more often, laughed softly at Tom's clumsy habits, and even began helping him with small chores around the house. Tom noticed every detail, the way her fingers lingered on objects before letting go, the careful way she moved around the furniture, and the subtle tilt of her head when she listened intently. Each gesture spoke volumes. He understood that her trust was still fragile, but it existed, and that was enough to fill his heart with hope. One evening, after a long day of quiet routines, Tom decided to take Lyria outside. He led her to the small garden behind his house, where the last rays of the sun lit the flowers in warm shades of orange and pink. Lyria's eyes widened as she looked around, touching the petals delicately, as though she had never seen anything like it before. "Do you like it?" Tom asked softly. She nodded, a shy smile on her lips. "It is beautiful," she whispered. The word sounded foreign on her tongue, yet it carried a weight of sincerity that made Tom's chest tighten. In that moment, he realized that beauty was not just in the garden, but in the small, fragile being standing beside him, learning to see the world again. As days passed, their bond grew stronger. Lyria started to open up more, sharing glimpses of her past in hesitant phrases and gestures. She told him about her husband, about the life they had shared and the cruel twist of fate that had left her alone. Her voice would sometimes tremble and tears would gather in her eyes, but Tom never turned away. He simply held her hand, offered a gentle smile, and reminded her that she was safe now. One rainy evening, as they sat by the window listening to the gentle patter of rain, Lyria spoke softly. "I thought I would never be happy again," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Tom reached out, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "Happiness can return," he said quietly. "You just have to let it in." She looked at him, her dark eyes glistening with emotion. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that it was possible, that someone could care for her deeply without asking for anything in return, that someone could protect her, understand her, and bring light back into a life that had been filled with darkness for so long. Over the next few weeks, they shared more moments of quiet companionship. Lyria began to help Tom cook, and although her alien gestures were unfamiliar, Tom found himself enjoying every small attempt. They laughed together, sometimes at simple mistakes, sometimes at words that were mispronounced or gestures misunderstood. Each shared laugh, each gentle touch, each quiet smile built a fragile but unbreakable bridge between their hearts. One night, as they sat in the dim light of the small living room, Lyria leaned her head on Tom's shoulder. "I never imagined a human could care so much," she murmured. Tom smiled, a warmth spreading through him that went beyond words. "Humans have their flaws," he said, "but we also have our hearts. And sometimes that is enough to change everything." Her lips curved into a soft, genuine smile, and for the first time in a long time, she felt the comfort of belonging. The walls she had built around herself were slowly crumbling, replaced by trust, hope, and the quiet strength of companionship. In the small, ordinary house at the edge of the city, amidst the chaos of the world outside, two lives had begun to intertwine. One was fragile, scarred by loss. The other, ordinary yet determined, full of human courage and kindness. And together they were discovering something rare and beautiful. A bond that could withstand fear, danger, and the shadows of the past. That night, as the stars appeared in the sky above, Tom and Lyria sat quietly together, hands brushing, hearts quietly sinking. The world outside could be harsh, unpredictable, and cruel, but inside, there was warmth, safety, and the fragile, unspoken promise of hope. Weeks passed, and Tom and Lyria's bond grew stronger, but peace, as always, was fragile. One quiet evening, while Tom worked in the small workshop repairing a broken device, Lyria sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. Her eyes, usually soft and calm, were distant, troubled. Tom noticed her tension immediately. "Something is wrong," he said gently, setting the tool down. Lyria hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her tunic. I saw someone today," she whispered. Her voice trembled. Tom's heart tightened. He had known that remnants of her past might follow her, but hearing it made the fear real. "Who?" he asked carefully, kneeling to meet her gaze. "An old friend, from my home colony," she said, shivering slightly. "Not all. We're kind. Some are dangerous. They might come looking for me." Tom's mind raced. He was just a human, not a warrior or a soldier, but in his chest a resolve burned brighter than fear. "Then we will face them together," he said firmly. "No one will harm you while I'm here." Lyria's eyes glistened with a mix of fear and gratitude. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust fully, but the shadows of her past were heavy. Tom reached out, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. "You've been hurt before," he said softly, "but that doesn't mean it will happen again. I will protect you. I promise." Days later, the threat became real. A group of alien traders appeared near Tom's home, searching for Lyria. Their intentions were clear. They wanted her back, or worse, to claim her as a possession. Lyria froze when she saw them, memories of fear and loss flooding back. Tom immediately stepped in front of her. "You will not touch her," he said, voice steady despite his fear. He knew he was smaller, weaker, human, but he would not let that stop him. Courage, determination, and love surged through him. Humans were often underestimated, but it was their heart, their resilience, and their refusal to back down that made them extraordinary. The confrontation was tense. The aliens sneered, mocking Tom, confident in their superiority. But Tom stood his ground, refusing to yield. "She is not yours," he said, every word sharp with conviction. "She chooses to stay, and I choose to protect her." One of the aliens lunged forward, and Tom dodged, using quick thinking and his surroundings to his advantage. Despite being weaker, he managed to outmaneuver them, using traps, quick reflexes, and sheer determination. Lyria watched in awe, realizing that human courage could shine brighter than brute strength. Her fear began to melt, replaced by trust and admiration. By the end, the aliens were driven away, humiliated and defeated. Lyria ran to Tom, wrapping her arms around him. You risked yourself for me again," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Tom hugged her back, his heart swelling. "Because you matter," he said simply. "Always." That night, as they sat together, Lyria rested her head on Tom's shoulder. "I never thought I could feel safe again," she murmured. Tom stroked her hair gently. "You are safe now, and nothing will take that from you." For the first time, Lyria truly believed it. The shadows of her past were still there, but they were no longer chains. They were reminders of how far she had come, and of the human who had shown her that trust, courage, and love could heal even the deepest wounds. In the quiet of their small home, as the city slept outside, Tom and Lyria held each other close. Fear, danger, and uncertainty still existed in the world, but within those four walls, they had something unbreakable, a bond forged through trust, care, and the extraordinary courage of the human heart. The days after the confrontation passed quietly. Tom and Lyria returned to their small routines, but something had changed between them. The bond they shared was no longer fragile. It had grown stronger, deeper, and more unbreakable than either of them had expected. Lyria moved with more confidence now, her eyes brighter, her laughter lighter. Tom, too, felt a warmth in his chest that went beyond friendship or obligation. It was pride, joy and love all intertwined. One morning, Tom decided to teach Lyria something simple: how to cook human food. He carefully explained each step, his hands guiding hers as she chopped vegetables. At first she was clumsy, the knife trembling in her delicate fingers, but she laughed at her mistakes. Her laughter was music to Tom's ears, full of hope and light. "You'll get it," he said encouragingly, smiling. "Humans are not perfect, but we learn quickly." Lyria looked at him, her dark eyes filled with something that made his heart ache with happiness. I like this, she whispered. Not just the food, but being here. Your home, Tom said simply, brushing a strand of silver hair from her face. And home is where you are safe. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in pinks and golds, Tom and Lyria stepped outside. The city around them buzzed with life, indifferent to the small miracle that had occurred in a quiet corner of its chaos. Lyria touched his hand, feeling the roughness, the warmth, and the steady strength in it. You are extraordinary, she said softly. Tom chuckled. I'm just human, he replied. But he knew, and so did she, that humans were extraordinary in ways that weapons and power could never measure. Courage, kindness, and the willingness to protect those who could not protect themselves. Those were the true strengths of his kind. The weeks turned into months, and their lives together deepened. Lyria began to help in the workshop, learning to repair simple devices with patience and precision. Tom taught her to read and write human words, and she taught him the subtle gestures of her alien culture. They learned from each other, laughed together, and supported each other through quiet moments and small challenges. One evening, as they watched the stars appear in the sky, Lyria leaned against Tom, her head resting on his shoulder. I never imagined this, she whispered. That a human could care so much. Tom smiled, feeling a warmth that words could never fully capture. We are stronger than we know, he said softly. Not because of muscles or weapons, but because of heart. And you taught me that courage isn't just about fighting. It's about caring, loving, and never giving up. Lyria's eyes glistened with tears, but they were tears of joy this time. She had lost so much in her life, her home, her husband, her sense of safety, but here, in this small home with this human, she had found something far greater: trust, belonging, and a chance to live again. They stood together in the garden, watching the gentle sway of flowers in the night breeze. Tom took Lyria's hand in his, holding it tightly but gently. Whatever comes next, he said, we will face it together. For the first time in years, Lyria felt free. Free to laugh, to hope, to dream, and to love. And Tom, who had only intended to buy meat at the market that fateful morning, realized that life had a way of giving the unexpected, the kind that changed everything, that made ordinary humans into something extraordinary. The city outside remained busy and loud, unaware of the small miracle within a simple home. But inside there was peace, warmth, and the quiet power of connection. Two lives, once lonely and broken, had found each other. Two hearts, once fearful and hesitant, had learned to trust and love. And in that simple, extraordinary bond, the world saw the true strength of humanity, not in weapons, not in strength, but in heart, courage, and compassion. Tom and Lyria stayed together, facing the world as partners, friends, and perhaps something more. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and their story, a human and an alien bound by trust, courage, and love, would continue, a testament to what it truly meant to be human.